The Ballast's Reckoning. From Bistro to Billionaire. CEO impactful opening. He leaned across the restaurant table, his new wife, Chloe, glittering in diamonds, and sneered at the woman he had abandoned. "It's a shame, Vivian," he crowed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people land promotions in super yachts in Monaco. Others, well, whatever this is." He believed she was finished, a discarded piece of his past. He thought she was nothing without him. What he didn't know was that while he was busy bragging, she was busy building an empire. And at the world's most exclusive event, he was about to watch his ex-wife step off a private billionaire's yacht, not as a guest, but as the chief executive officer, CEO. If you believe that a comeback built on genius is the sweetest revenge, hit the like button now. Humiliation at the bistro and the seed of vengeance. The aroma of roasted coffee and fine pastries usually brought comfort to Dr. Vivian Marsh. The small bistro, the lucid corner, was her one weekly splurge, a small island of normalcy in the turbulent ocean her life had become. It was here, laptop open and a warm cappuccino beside her, that she was rebuilding. Every line of code she wrote, every email she sent, was a brick in the new wall of her future. Then the bell above the door jingled, and a shadow fell across her table. "Well, look who it is," said a voice that still haunted her low moments. Vivian looked up. Her heart no longer broke. It merely seized like a car engine flooded with ice water. Trent Harrison, her ex-husband, stood there in a suit so new it looked starched. "It's an Armani," she noted with the clinical distance of an appraiser. Clinging to his arm was Chloe Vance. Blonde, bright, and blindingly expensive. A Cartier bangle was stacked next to a diamond tennis bracelet that Vivian knew, for a fact, cost more than her entire graduate education. "Trent, Chloe," Vivian said, her voice admirably steady. She closed her laptop. "Vivian, darling," Chloe chirped, her voice a sharp rattle of false sympathy. "I barely recognized you. You look comfortable." "Comfortable?" It was a dagger disguised as a compliment. Vivian wore simple dark jeans, a navy cashmere sweater, and her trusted old loafers. She had been working for 12 straight hours and stepped out for a breather. Chloe, meanwhile, looked fresh out of a Vogue editorial. "We were celebrating," Trent said, puffing out his chest. He signaled the waiter, not to order, but to be seen. "I got promoted. Senior Vice President of European Markets." "Congratulations, Trent," Vivian said, meaning it. A clean break was all she had ever truly wanted. "Things are really taking off," he continued, unable to stop himself. He was performing, not for her, but for Chloe and the restaurant at large. "The new bonus is, well, let's just say it's significant. We're flying to Monaco this weekend for the yacht exhibition. Our client, you know, the one I landed, has his 45-meter yacht docked at Port Hercule. It's another world, Vivian. You wouldn't believe it." Vivian felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. He wasn't just giving good news. He was rubbing her nose in what she had lost. Or rather, what he believed she had lost. "He's being modest," Chloe chirped. "He's the star of the whole firm. Everyone says so." Then she glanced at Vivian's laptop, wrinkling her perfectly sculpted nose. "Are you still, fiddling with that little ocean project? It's sweet that you have a hobby." "A hobby?" Vivian's hobby was a complex schema for an AI-driven, self-sustaining marine filtration system that could, in theory, clear microplastics from coastal waters at 10 times the rate of any current technology. It was the culmination of her life's work, the piece she had put on pause to support his career, the dream she had resurrected from the ashes of their marriage. "It's going well, thank you," Vivian said stiffly. Trent leaned in, his voice dropping to a condescending, confidential tone. "Listen, Vivian, I'm glad you're coping. Seriously, but don't you get tired of this? The little cafes, the trying. When we were married, you had everything. I had your everything, Trent. She corrected him, her voice low but sharp. I'm working on building my own. Trent laughed. It was a short, dry sound of pity. Sure, your own. Look, I know the divorce left you with, well, not much. If you're ever really in a bind, a real one, my assistant can probably find you some admin work. Data entry, maybe. It was the final, calculated cruelty. The offer of charity. He saw her as a broken, pathetic creature to be pitied. A cautionary tale he could tell his shiny new friends. I'll keep that in mind, Vivian said, her spine turning to steel. She gathered her things, leaving a few bills on the table. Oh, and Vivian, he called out as she reached the door. She paused but didn't turn around. Try to get out a little more. You look pale. She walked out of the lucid corner without looking back. The sound of his cackle and Chloe's tinkling laugh followed her into the street. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked faster, her mind already back on her schematics. He thought he was watching her drown. He had no idea she was learning to breathe underwater. Interactive question 1. What would you do in Vivian's shoes after that public humiliation? Walk away quietly or confront Trent right there? Comment your strategy. Share this story if you've ever had a ballast moment. From ballast to engine, the birth of Sterling Oceanic. The first month after the divorce, Vivian had lived in a fog. The betrayal wasn't just the affair with Chloe, a junior associate in his department. It was the words he had used. The final fight had been a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I'm suffocating, Vivian, he had shouted, gesturing around the beautiful minimalist apartment, the one she had decorated, the one she had managed while he focused on his career. You have no ambition, he had accused. I'm on a rocket ship and you are ballast. You're just dead weight. You used to be brilliant. Now all you talk about is plankton and ocean currents. It's boring. It's my field, Trent, she had shouted back, her voice raw. It's marine engineering. It's what I was doing when you met me. And now you just tinker, he sneered. Chloe gets it. She's hungry. She understands my world. His world. A world of business lunches and quarterly reports, of stock options and promotion. She had stepped down from her own ladder to keep his stable, and now that he had reached the top, he was kicking her off. The divorce settlement was calculated and swift. He had generously given her half their liquid assets, which she discovered had been systematically minimized for months. He kept the apartment, the car, the art. She was left with just enough to rent a tiny one-bedroom flat in San Francisco and a bitter taste in her mouth. For 2 months, she was the woman he accused her of being. Listless, broken, a ghost haunting a life she no longer recognized. She wondered if that was her fate. Would she just be Trent Harrison's ex-wife forever? Then, one rainy Tuesday, she was unpacking a box labeled old college stuff, and it broke open. Out spilled her old textbooks, her notes, and her thesis. The title, underlined in red, stared up at her. Dynamic AI Modeling for Autonomous Ocean Filtration Systems. It wasn't just a paper. It was her soul. She sold the only valuable thing he had left her, a set of diamond earrings he had given her for their 5th anniversary. She had always hated them. They felt like a transaction. She sold them and used the $15,000 to buy a used 3D printer, high-spec server components, and a membership to a local tech incubator space near the San Francisco waterfront, where rents were cheaper. She lived on instant ramen and cheap coffee. She worked 20 hours a day. She coded. She built. She simulated. She failed. The first prototype, a small, spider-like drone, sank to the bottom of the incubator's test tank and short-circuited. She cried for 10 minutes, wiped her eyes, and started rebuilding it from scratch. She submitted her proposal to 43 different venture capital firms, environmental grants, and tech incubators. 42 were rejected. Not commercially viable, one said. Too niche, said another. Overly ambitious scope for a new applicant, said a third. But one replied, it wasn't a yes, it was a maybe. Your proposal, while unconventional, has landed on the desk of our innovation committee. We are impressed by the core concept, but skeptical of the energy-to-filtration ratio claims. We invite you to present your findings at our Green Tech Innovation Summit. The email was signed by an assistant to the board of the Sterling Foundation. Vivian stared at the name. Sterling, as in Donovan Don Sterling, the eccentric, reclusive tech billionaire, the man who had revolutionized data processing in the 90s and then disappeared to invest his fortune in ocean conservation. He was a legend. He was also, according to industry rumors, absolutely ruthless and impossible to impress. She had one shot, the general and the $50 million deal. The headquarters of the Sterling Foundation was not a gleaming tower of glass and steel. It was a low, unassuming building of concrete and red wood, nestled in a pine forest near Portland, Oregon, a place that listened rather than shouted. Vivian, in her only good suit, a slightly large charcoal gray from a consignment shop, felt her hands trembling. She was in a boardroom that felt more like a university library, all dark wood and leather. At the end of a long table sat Don Sterling. He wasn't what she expected. He was in his 60s, with a shock of white hair, a weathered face, and piercing blue eyes. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans. He looked more like a fishing boat captain than a man worth $50 billion. Ms. Marsh, he said, his voice a low growl. He didn't rise. He just gestured to the chair across from him. You have 30 minutes. My team says your calculations are optimistic. Vivian took a deep breath. My calculations are accurate, Mr. Sterling. They are just new. For the next 20 minutes, she didn't just present. She taught. She soared. She showed her simulations, her data, her CAD models. She talked about fluid dynamics, AI route finding, and biopolymer compounds that could trap microfilaments without harming zooplankton. The board members, 3 men and 2 women in sharp suits, peppered her with questions. What about the energy cost? One asked. Solved, Vivian said, swiping to a slide. It's self-sufficient. It uses micro-tidal generators. It doesn't move against the current. It thinks with it. It's not a machine. It's a creature. There was silence. Don Sterling hadn't said a word. He just stared at her, his head cocked. Finally, he spoke. You built this in your apartment. It wasn't a question. And an incubator space, she clarified. With what? Your divorce settlement? Vivian flinched. The question was too personal, too sharp. With my capital, Mr. Sterling. It was seed funding from a previous investment that failed. A small smile touched Sterling's lips. Good answer, but you're wrong about something. Vivian's heart sank. It's over. You're asking for $5 million to build a full-scale prototype. Yes, that is the projection. Wrong, he said. He leaned forward. The full, terrifying weight of his intellect and power filled the room. $5 million is a rounding error. It's not enough to build this, to manufacture it at scale, to overcome regulatory hurdles, to deploy it in the Atlantic, the Pacific. You don't need $5 million. You need 50. And you need my entire logistics chain. You're thinking like a scientist. You need to start thinking like a general. Vivian was speechless. I don't understand. I'm not interested in funding your project, Ms. Marsh, Sterling said, standing up. The board members scrambled to their feet. Vivian felt the floor drop out from under her. I am interested in acquiring it, he continued, walking around the table. I'm creating a new subsidiary of Sterling Industries. It will be called Sterling Oceanic. We will absorb your patents, your research, and your prototype. We will give you my labs, my engineers, and my ships." He stopped directly in front of her. She had to crane her head back to look him in the eye. "And you," he said, "will be its chief executive officer. No. DEO, effective immediately. Your salary will be significant, but you will answer to no one but me. You will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. You will live on planes and in labs. You will not fail. Do you accept?" Vivian's world, which had shrunk to the size of a one-bedroom apartment and a warm cappuccino, suddenly expanded to encompass the entire globe. She didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She simply extended her hand. "When do I start?" Interactive question 2. Do you think Don Sterling is only interested in Vivian's technology? Or does he have ulterior motives? What kind of boss will an eccentric billionaire be? Comment your prediction for Trent's reaction when he hears about this. Monaco. The glorious conclusion. The next 6 months were a blur of motion. The timid, comfortable woman Trent had sneered at in the cafe was gone, forged into something new in the crucible of 100-hour work weeks. Vivian moved to Zurich, the new headquarters for Sterling Oceanic. Her first-class flights, I don't pay my CEOs to be tired, took her from engineering labs in Singapore to polymer foundries in Germany. The transformation was profound. It wasn't just the clothes, though she now wore the quiet, lethal elegance of stealth luxury, Loro Piana cashmere, and acris suits that whispered rather than shouted their worth. It was her presence. She presided over meetings with 30 engineers, all men, all older than her, and dissected their fluid dynamics reports with a precision that left no room for argument. She learned to command a room, not by being the loudest, but by being the most informed. Trent Harrison had faded into irrelevance. She hadn't thought about him in 178 days. Then, one Monday, Don Sterling called her. "Pack your bags, Vivian." "Where am I going?" she asked, pulling up her calendar. "Tokyo, Monaco," he said. "The yacht exhibition." Vivian paused. The name hit her like an unpleasant little stone. "The yacht exhibition, sir. I thought we were presenting to the ASEAN Environmental Council, and we will. But first, we're going to sell to the biggest polluters. Cargo ships aren't the problem, Vivian. It's these people, the mega yachts. They dump trash. They burn fuel. But they also want to look green. They're obsessed with image. And more than that, they're obsessed with new technology. They'll pay a premium for it." "So what? I'm setting up a booth?" Sterling laughed. "No, Vivian. You're not setting up a booth. You are the main event. I'm docking my flagship, the Odyssey. It's the most advanced green tech vessel on the planet. And for the last 3 months, it's had your full-scale Siren prototype secretly installed. We're not just presenting data. We're showing them the results. You are no longer a scientist asking for a grant. You are a CEO closing a deal. Port Hercule in Monaco wasn't just a harbor. It was a cathedral of wealth, a forest of white superstructures and gleaming chrome. Trent Harrison was in heaven. He stood on the teak deck of the Aurelia, a 45-meter yacht that, in the grand scheme of this harbor, was respectable, but not dominant. He was a guest of a guest, but he acted like he owned the place. Chloe, in a bright yellow bikini that was a little too tight, leaned against him. "Trent, darling, the champagne is warm. Tell them to bring another bottle of Dom." "Of course, babe," Trent said, snapping his fingers at a passing waiter. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. This was the moment he deserved. Then he saw her. She was standing on the dock, just past the security barrier, looking down at a tablet. She was dressed not for a party, but for business. An immaculate white silk blouse, tailored navy dress pants, and simple, elegant loafers. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun. Trent's smile widened. It was too perfect. His ex-wife, his charity case, right here, at the scene of his greatest triumph. She must be here as some low-level supplier's assistant. "Oh, this is priceless," he whispered to Chloe, pointing. Chloe squinted. "Is that Vivian? God, what is she doing here? She looks like she's going to a job interview." "I have to do this," Trent said, giddy on his own power. He leaned over the polished railing of the Aurelia. "Vivian!" he yelled. The potential client Swiss banker flinched at the breach of decorum. "Vivian Marsh!" Vivian looked up from her tablet. Her face registered no surprise, no anger, no humiliation. Only cool, polite recognition. She nodded. "What a coincidence running into you here," Trent yelled, his voice dripping condescension. "A little out of your depth, aren't you? This is the deep end. You should stick to the local swimming pool." "Hello, Trent, Chloe. You look well?" "We are," Trent boomed. "We're about to sign a deal. You know how it is. This is how the other half lives, right? What brings you here, cleaning the boats?" "I'm actually here for a presentation," Vivian said, her expression unreadable. "A presentation?" Trent let out a loud, arrogant laugh. "To who? The seagulls? Don't tell me it's your little ocean project." "Something like that," Vivian said. Just then, a silence fell over their section of the dock. The polite murmur of the crowd was pierced by the sound of a different kind of engine, the electric whine of a custom-built tender. It was a $500,000 speedboat painted matte black. It sliced the water and pulled up to the VIP security gate right where Vivian stood. The security guards, who had been ignoring everyone, snapped to attention. Two men in sober dark suits stepped out, followed by a figure that made Trent Harrison's blood run cold. It was Don Sterling himself, the single most powerful, reclusive, and respected man in green technology. He was a king, and this harbor was his court. Trent's Swiss banker client gasped. That is Sterling!" Sterling strode onto the dock, saw Vivian, and a warm smile broke across his weathered face. He ignored the stares and the whispers. "Vivian, darling," he said, his voice ringing clearly over the water. "Is everything ready for the demonstration?" Vivian nodded, all business. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. The new filtration metrics just came in from the Odyssey's traverse. They are exceptional." Trent's brain tried to process the words. Mr. Sterling. Vivian. Odyssey. Exceptional. It was an impossible word salad. Sterling grinned. "Told you never to bet against a good idea." Then he gestured to the waiting tender. "After you, Madam CEO, Madam CEO." The two words hung in the air. Trent's champagne glass froze halfway to his mouth. Chloe's perfect smile dissolved, leaving her face blank and slack-jawed. Vivian Marsh, the ballast, the hobbyist, the woman he had offered a data entry job, stepped onto the tender. She sat down, crossed her legs, and just before the boat pulled away, she looked up. She made eye contact with Trent. She didn't smile. She didn't sneer. She just held his gaze. It was a look of pure, cold, indifferent finality. The tender sped off, not toward a mid-level ship like the Aurelia, but toward the harbor horizon, where the undisputed queen of the exhibition was anchored, the Odyssey. It was a 100-meter leviathan of sustainable glass and teak, a technological marvel everyone had been talking about, but aboard which no one had been invited. And his ex-wife, the woman he had called boring, was heading to its deck. Interactive question. How do you think Trent will react to those two words, Madam CEO? Is Vivian's victory purely professional success or a personal redemption? Comment your thoughts. We want to hear your deepest analysis. Trent's breakdown and Sterling's cleanup. On the teak deck of the Aurelia, the silence was a physical thing. Trent Harrison was frozen, his arm still resting on the railing, the champagne glass forgotten. "Madam CEO." The two words echoed in the sudden vacuum, replaying in his mind. He couldn't make them fit. The Swiss banker, Mr. Stab, who had until now been the picture of bored politeness, now looked at Trent with a new, terrifying intensity. He looked like a biologist who had just discovered a particularly unpleasant insect species. "You know Vivian Marsh?" Stab asked. His voice was no longer bored. It was a cold, flat sheet of steel. Trent, still trying to salvage the situation, puffed out his chest. "Know her? Of course. I made her. She's my ex-wife." He said the last two words with a familiar dismissive arrogance. It was the wrong move. Stab's eyes widened, and he let out a short, sharp cackle of pure, disbelieving contempt. "Your ex-wife?" Chloe, who had been clinging to Trent's arm, now looked utterly lost. Her perfect smile was gone, replaced by open-mouthed confusion. "Trent, what is he talking about? CEO? That's impossible. He must be mistaken. She's nothing." "As the new CEO of Sterling Oceanic," Stab cut in, his voice slicing the air. He pointed to the tender, now a black dot, speeding toward the Odyssey. "Her Little Ocean project, as you so charmingly called it, is a patented AI-driven filtration system that is about to become a mandatory installation on every commercial vessel on Earth." Stab stepped closer. "The new UN maritime regulation, which I am told is being announced next month, is being written around her technology. She's not just green tech, you fool. She's a global tax. She is a one-woman monopoly. Every person in this harbor, every shipping magnate, every cruise line, every one of these yacht owners will be paying her company millions starting next year, just for the privilege of floating." He paused, letting the crushing weight of the revelation fall. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper of pure disgust. "You, the man who has been begging my firm for a minor investment. You stood here on my friend's boat and yelled at her. You offered her a cleaning job." Trent was speechless. He could only stare. "That's the point," Stab snapped. "That's the entire point. You were married to a mind like that. A mind that is about to change the world, and you didn't know it. You looked at a diamond and thought it was a piece of glass. You called her ballast." Stab straightened his tie. His face was a mask of finality. "Our meeting, Mr. Harrison, is terminated. My firm's potential investment is also terminated. I don't do business with fools. It's bad for the portfolio. You are an embarrassment, a liability." He turned and walked away. Trent stood there. He looked at Chloe. She was staring at him, her face pale, her eyes wide. The cold swiftness of calculation was evident. She was assessing her losses. "Trent," she said, her voice utterly flat. All the sweet cooing was gone. "Chloe, honey, listen," he began, trying to reach for her arm. It's a complication. It doesn't mean anything." She took a physical step back from his hand, as if it were covered in grime. "You are a fool," she whispered, her voice laced with a venom that chilled him to the bone. "You had her, and you let her go for me." The implication was clear. She herself was a terrible investment, and she was furious at him for making it. "Get me another drink," he snarled, a desperate, pathetic attempt to reassert his dominance. "Get it yourself." She snatched her designer handbag from the deck chair. With one last withering look of contempt, she turned and walked away from him. She headed toward a group of Italian men near the bar who had been watching the entire exchange, a predatory smile already forming on her lips. She was already liquidating her assets and looking for the next host. Trent Harrison was left completely, utterly alone on the deck, surrounded by laughter and music. The champagne in his hand was warm and watery. He looked across the harbor toward the Odyssey, lit up like a floating palace, a beacon of a power he could never, ever touch. He hadn't just lost his ex-wife, he had thrown her away. He had thrown away the key to the entire world. All because he was too arrogant, too small, and too blind to see what was right in front of him. The toast to the currents. On the aft deck of the Odyssey, it wasn't a party space. It was a theater of innovation. The sun was setting over Monaco, casting the super yachts in rich golden light. But here, on Don Sterling's flagship, the lighting was a cool electric blue. Dr. Vivian Marsh stood at the podium. She was not the woman from the cafe. She was the CEO. The problem, Vivian began, her voice perfectly modulated, has always been scale. We talk about cleaning the oceans, but we do it with nets and barges, like trying to empty a stadium with a teaspoon. We have been treating the symptoms, not the system. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with a dynamic 3D model of the Atlantic Gyre. The siren system doesn't attack. It adapts. It doesn't fight the currents. It thinks with them. It's not a filter. It's an AI-driven autonomous marine ecosystem. She displayed the results on a screen from the Odyssey. The ship had been deliberately following a cargo route. "This is the water we took in," she said, showing astonishing levels of microplastics. "And this," she said, her voice dropping, "is the water we released." The pollutant numbers were 0, all of them. But a new meter had appeared. Oxygenation and phytoplankton viability. Both were up 15%. A gasp, a collective intake of breath, swept through the crowd. "We are not just cleaning the ocean," Vivian said, her voice ringing with the unbreakable conviction of truth. "We are healing it. The S-1000 is not a cost. It is the future of maritime viability. It is the price of admission to a planet no longer willing to wait." She paused. "The new UN maritime regulation, which my team and I helped draft, will be presented next month. A system like this will not be optional. My team at Sterling Oceanic is now taking pre-orders for the first wave deployment." The next hour was a blur. Vivian secured letters of intent and firm orders, totaling over $900 million. She finally made her way to the bow, seeking a moment of silence. Mr. Stab was the first to reach her. "I must apologize. Your vision, it is magnificent," he told her, his face flushed. The Greek magnate, Stavros, yelled over his shoulder, "I want 20 units. I'll pay a 50% premium for expedited delivery. We'll retrofit my entire fleet." She handled it all masterfully. She was precise, charming, yet not warm. Brilliant, yet not arrogant. She was, in every sense, the CEO. She ascended the private spiral staircase to the Odyssey's top deck, a space reserved for only 2 people, Don Sterling and his CEO. "I'd say that went rather well," Sterling said, his back to her. $900 million in one afternoon, Vivian mused, a tired but genuine smile on her face. "Not bad for a day's work, Madam CEO." He finally turned to her, his blue eyes sharp in the twilight. "You handled that distraction well today." Vivian flushed. "The distraction, sir? You mean Trent Harrison? Your ex-husband." "I watched the whole thing from the tender. He was loud and spectacularly wrong. I apologize. I promise it will never ever happen again." Sterling held up a hand. "Vivian, stop. You do yourself a great disservice to apologize for his failure. You have nothing to regret." "I don't understand how he was here," she said, shaking her head. "His firm, Harrison and Associates, is not at this level." "Ah, yes. Harrison and Associates, mid-tier financial services, ambitious but over-leveraged," Sterling said, sipping his water. "I bought them 7 months ago." The air left Vivian's lungs. You bought Trent's company?" "Correct. It was a distressed asset. I absorbed their portfolio to get a hold of some of their biotech holdings. Harrison and Associates was just part of the package." "Then, you knew?" "I knew of him," Sterling corrected, but I asked my head of compliance to do a deep dive. Standard procedure. When you were being considered for a senior executive, we checked for possible liabilities. Turns out, Mr. Harrison is not just an arrogant fool, Vivian. He's a thief. A thief? She whispered. First, from you. My audit found he'd been filing benefits claims for a spouse he divorced 6 months prior. He was still claiming you as a dependent on his health plan. That's fraud. And then he stole from me. His expense reports were a work of fiction. He was charging client dinners in Portofino and Paris, dinners which, when cross-referenced, were found to be with Ms. Chloe Vance. He was using company funds to build his shiny new life. You acquired my company, Vivian said, the words catching in her throat. Because it was brilliant. Because it was the future. Sterling nodded. It is the single most important piece of marine engineering I have ever seen. You are a genius, and I wanted that genius on my team. That is the only reason you are here. He paused, then allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. And it added, as a synergistic bonus, the opportunity for me to do some overdue house cleaning. I don't tolerate parasites in my ecosystem, Vivian. Not in the ocean, and not in my boardrooms. 100 meters away on the public dock, Trent Harrison sat on a cold marble bench. His phone vibrated. It was an automated email from Human Resources. Subject: Employment status. Notification. Dear Mr. Harrison, you are hereby notified that your position as Senior Vice President has been eliminated as part of a strategic corporate restructuring, effective immediately. Your access to all systems has been revoked. Cause for this termination is under review by our compliance department, pending an audit of your expense and benefits history. The phone slipped from his hand. He didn't scream. He deflated. On the deck of the Odyssey, Vivian looked out at the water. He called me ballast, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He said I was dead weight holding him back. An understandable error, Sterling replied, joining her at the railing. He is a man who has only ever lived on the surface. He is impressed by the whitecaps, the spray, the noise. He has no idea of the power of the currents beneath, the ones that actually move the world. He raised his glass of water, the ice clinking softly. To the currents, Madam CEO. Vivian raised her champagne flute, the bubbles catching the moonlight. She thought of the code she wrote, the engines she designed, the deep, silent, powerful systems that were at that very moment healing the world. To the currents, she said, her voice clear and strong. Let's turn the tide. Meaningful conclusion and final call to action. What an epic comeback. Dr. Vivian Marsh didn't just get revenge. She gained redemption. She proved that the person someone discards might be the treasure the whole world is waiting for. Her ex believed she was ballast, but she was the brilliant mind with the power to change the world. He was left with his arrogance, and she was left with an empire. What do you think of this conclusion, and how Don Sterling handled the situation? Do you believe Trent got what he deserved? Leave us your opinion in the comments. We read at every single one. If you loved this story of triumph and poetic justice, hit like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have a new powerful story coming very soon, and you don't want to miss it. Epilogue. The shifting tides of power were at 4. The final audit and the cold confrontation 6 months after the Monaco Yacht exhibition. The siren system was not just a marvel, it was a mandatory global utility. Dr. Vivian Marsh, CEO of Sterling Oceanic, was on the cover of Forbes, not for her wealth, but for her influence. She was no longer just a scientist. She was a world builder, steering regulations and technology in equal measure. Meanwhile, Trent Harrison had vanished from the glittering landscape of Chicago finance. Stripped of his job, his reputation, and his significant bonus structure, he found that the world he once dominated was surprisingly cold when he was no longer valuable. Chloe, true to her nature, had left him before the plane even landed back from Monaco, selling her diamond tennis bracelet to afford a first-class ticket out of his life. Trent now lived in a small, rented apartment, his days filled with calls from compliance officers and lawyers. He was a creature of habit, and his habits were his undoing. One morning, Vivian was in the Zurich headquarters, reviewing the final compliance audit of the defunct Heiress and Associates, now a shell of Sterling Industries. The head of compliance, a woman named Ms. Thorne, placed a single, damning folder on her desk. "This is the final report on Trent Harrison, Madam CEO," Ms. Thorne said, her voice crisp. "The audit confirmed substantial misuse of company funds. We are pursuing civil restitution for over $500,000. However, the most egregious fraud was the continued claim of spousal benefits long after the divorce was finalized. Since this directly involves you and our corporate health plan, it requires a statement." Vivian picked up the folder. Inside were copies of medical forms, signatures forged by Trent, claiming that she was his dependent. He had continued to siphon money from the system for months, even after calling her ballast. "He used the system I created to steal from me," Vivian murmured, a bitter irony. "Indeed. We have offered him a final chance to resolve the matter quietly. Sign over the remainder of his personal assets to cover the debt, and we drop the criminal complaint for fraud. And if he refuses, he faces jail time. He lost the last court motion to retain his remaining assets, a small but valuable art collection. It's set for auction next week. We believe the funds from the auction will be used to pay the restitution." Vivian closed the folder, her face unreadable. She knew Trent's single greatest vanity was his small, curated collection of modern art. Selling it to pay for his humiliation would be the final cut. "I need to meet with him," Vivian stated. "Arrange a meeting at the law firm handling the asset transfer. Just him and me. No lawyers. The art auction and the final price." The meeting took place in a sterile conference room in a downtown San Francisco legal office, a far cry from the glittering offices of Trent's former life. Trent walked in, dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit. He looked older, defeated and hollow. The ambition that once radiated from him like heat was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate fear. "Vivian," he rasped, standing awkwardly. He hadn't seen her since the Monaco dock. Vivian sat at the head of the table, composed and powerful. She wore a simple black suit, an outfit that cost more than his remaining savings, but spoke of competence, not flash. "Trent," she replied, her voice neutral. She slid the final settlement document across the table. "You know why you're here. Sign this, and the civil matter is closed. You forfeit your assets, and the criminal complaint is dropped." Trent stared at the document, his gaze lingering on the line item for the art collection forfeit. "You're taking the art," he whispered. "You know what that means to me." "It means you pay your debt," Vivian said, meeting his eyes. "You accumulated that debt by lying, Trent. Lying to me, lying to the firm, lying to yourself. You stole from the system and you're paying the price." "It was just a few forms, Vivian. Everyone does it. You're the CEO of $1 billion company. You could make this go away with one phone call. You want to ruin me over a hobby?" The word hobby hung in the air, a cruel echo from the past. Vivian stood up, leaning her hands on the table. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the authority of the deep currents she now commanded. "No, Trent, I don't want to ruin you. You did that yourself. But I am here because you need to understand the difference between value and worth." She paused, letting the silence build. "You called me ballast. You discarded the work of my life, the core of my being, as a hobby. You valued a corporate title and a diamond bracelet more than integrity and commitment. That was your choice. You thought my worth was tied to your career. You were wrong." She tapped the folder containing the audit. "Now look at this. You have been caught stealing. Your ambition was fueled by fraud. You are losing your precious art collection to pay for the hobby you mocked. The price is your pride. The final price is the consequence of your choice." Trent's facade finally cracked. He buried his face in his hands, defeated. "I'm sorry, Vivian. I never thought it would come to this." "The moment you called me ballast, it was already here," she replied, her voice softening slightly, not out of pity, but finality. "Sign the papers, Trent." He slowly raised his head, his eyes red. He picked up the pen and with a shaky hand signed his name, officially relinquishing his last tangible claim to his former life. Vivian didn't take the pen. She didn't say goodbye. She simply gathered the signed documents. "Ms. Thorne will handle the transfer," she said. She walked toward the door, paused, and looked back at him. "And Trent," she added, "when you're ready to rebuild, start with honesty, not ambition." Then she was gone, leaving Trent alone in the sterile room to face the full silence of his failure. The curator's gift and the new current. The day of the art auction, Vivian didn't attend. She was in Oslo, signing a landmark environmental treaty. However, she had sent Ms. Thorne with specific instructions. The auction proceeded. The final, desperate vestiges of Trent Harrison's vanity sold off piece by piece to satisfy his debt to Sterling Industries. The final hammer fell. The debt was settled. Later that week, back in Zurich, Ms. Thorne reported the successful transaction. "The money has been returned to Sterling Industries, Madam CEO. Your instructions regarding the Ames Denton bronze were followed." "The small wave?" Vivian asked, recalling the piece. A simple, elegant bronze sculpture of a breaking wave that Trent had always called too subdued. "Yes, it was purchased, as requested. It is now registered as an asset of the Sterling Foundation." Vivian smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that reached her blue eyes. "Good. Have it delivered, not to my office, but to the Southport Marine Science Center in Maine." Ms. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Is that a donation, Madam CEO?" "It's a gift, Ms. Thorne," Vivian clarified. "It's a small piece of art for the children's study area. It should be placed next to the tidal pool exhibit, a constant reminder that the true power of the ocean is not in the size of the waves, but in the strength of the current beneath them." Vivian turned to the panoramic window of her office, overlooking the vast, technologically advanced testing facility of Sterling Oceanic. She wasn't standing on the deck of a yacht, but on the bridge of a global movement. She had achieved more than revenge. She had achieved vindication. She had turned the ballast of her own life into the foundational material for the world's future. Her story was complete. Not with a diamond or a title, but with the quiet, powerful knowledge that she had chosen integrity, and integrity had ultimately won.